reporters for Chapter 10, which is the Designing Good Questionnaires. A good questionnaire is one which helps directly achieve the research objectives, provides complete and accurate information, is easy for both interviewers and respondents to complete, and it is also designed to make a sound analysis and interpretation possible, and it's brief. Having a good questionnaire lets the researcher to have a proper analysis, and it is also beneficial for both the interviewer and the respondent, since it was designed properly and it doesn't cause any complications. It may appear that creating a good questionnaire is a simple and uncomplicated undertaking. However, it demands a surprising amount of time and effort. Multiple authors are usually required for a good questionnaire because each author will be indifferent to certain formatting and phrasing boundaries or biases. Numerous authors working individually and collaboratively can minimize such flaws. So here in Chapter 10, we are going to tackle the ways and the things that we must consider to create and design a good questionnaire. Also, in designing a good questionnaire, multiple authors or people were needed so that they can brainstorm and share different ideas in order to come up with the best idea of creating a good questionnaire, as they have different insights, perspectives, and limitations. So what is a good questionnaire? Questionnaires should be as short as necessary, well organized, visually appealing, simple and easy to respond, and polite with professional tone. These are the things that we must consider in doing or creating a good questionnaire. First, what are the questions that we should ask? How are we going to phrase those questions? How are we going to sequence the questions? And what's an effective questionnaire layout? And how should we retest the questionnaire? A good questionnaire is considered as an art. So there are different aspects in designing a good questionnaire, like its format, its content, the questions, wherein it must be simple and organized and pleasing to the eye. Also, it must be clear to be answered properly by the respondents. Finding qualified respondents with screeners and filter questions. Screeners are used to eliminate all but most qualified survey participants. The purpose of the screening questionnaire is to rule out participants who are familiar with the research domain and have recently participated in another marketing study. So in screeners, this is where the screening takes place, when you have to filter the respondents to identify who among them are qualified enough to participate in the study. Wherein in filler questions, in contrast to screeners, ensure that only qualified respondents engage in a survey. They ensure that respondents receive the relevant questionnaire from a pool of various questionnaires. So in filter questions, it aims to properly distribute the right questionnaire for the right respondents among the plenty types or variety types of questionnaires. Next is, these are the respondents that can participate in the study. First is the aware non-users. From people who recognize but have never used the brand, you can discover why they have chosen not to try it. They are the people who have an idea but haven't tried the brand personally, and you can ask them the reason why they decided not to try it. The trier rejectors. From people who've tried but no longer use the brand, you can discover why they stopped using it. So these are the people who used it before but not anymore, and you can ask them the reason for stopping using it. Next is current users. From people who using the brand currently, you can ask them the things that they like and dislike about the brand. Familiarizing yourself by skip patterns. Skip patterns are a set of instructions that questionnaire respondents receive based on their responses to prior questions to answer or disregard particular questions. We must familiarize ourselves with skip patterns because questions with skip options might literally just be skipped or ignored since it doesn't require an answer. Familiarizing skip patterns means we must learn the techniques on how it was properly used on a questionnaire, because if not, it might cause an error on our analysis and summary. Organizing your questions. Questionnaires, like conversations, should have a logical flow. Organizing your questions, meaning the flow of the questions must be all connected and the questions should be related to each other. So the first is going from general to specific. The large picture questions comes first, followed by the more specific ones. Starting with particular inquiries can disturb respondents and prevent them from properly priming their memories to answer your questions. We must start our questions from something big before we proceed to the smallest detail. With this tactic, respondents will be able to warm up their minds with the general questions and can properly think when specific questions were being asked. Because asking specific questions immediately on the beginning of the questionnaire might cause them confusion, and since they have to think hard right away. Next is deciding on the general sequence of questions. To ensure that your respondents are qualified, start with screeners. After that, ask questions to get them thinking about the issue they're interested in. Following that, your next round of questions should be easy and simple. Then you can start asking more difficult and sensitive questions. On some sorts of questionnaire, there are times when the questions are a bit sensitive and challenging to answer. So we must not start at those questions in creating a good questionnaire. First, with the use of screeners and filter questions, we must identify who are the qualified enough respondents to participate in our study. Next is, just like on going from general to specific, we must give them questions that is not that hard to answer yet, so that they can warm up their mind, followed by questions that are simple yet direct, and after that we can now finally ask those sensitive and challenging questions. Consider where you want your mentally demanding and sensitive questions to go. Here are some general placement suggestions if you need to include these types of questions. So in mentally challenging questions, this is the type mentally challenging questions. This type of question requires a great memory skills, which is why it is needed to put somewhere on the middle or on the bottom of the questionnaire when the respondents have already warmed up their minds, so they don't have to think hard right away on the beginning of the questions. Next is the sense questions might cause the respondents to be suspicious, so putting it at the end of the questionnaire prevents them to refuse since they already answered it. Providing clear instructions. The simpler and less unclear instructions are, the more probable it is that respondents will comprehend them and reply accurately to each question. In designing a good questionnaire, we must provide a clear and understandable instruction so that the respondents can quickly cooperate and answer the questionnaire since they understand it easily. It also prevents us to worry whether they answered it correctly since the instructions were clearly stated on the questionnaire. As you can see on the picture, there is the original version of the questionnaire and the revised version of the questionnaire. So you can see that the revised version of the questionnaire is quite more understandable compared to the original version. Creating an effective layout. Binding, color schemes, question numbering, and page formatting all have an impact on these perceptions. Data input efficiency is also influenced by these parameters as well as question coding. The appearance of our questionnaires does reflect on how the respondents see the researchers. A low-quality questionnaire might cause us to be seen as an amateur researchers. So we must create a layout effectively on the questionnaire for us to be recognized as a professional researchers. So this is where binding, color schemes, question numbering, and page formatting comes in. First is booklets. Make questionnaires appear more professional, which will encourage respondents to put more thought into their responses. In a booklet style, you can also include more questions each page. So here, stapled papers were too cliché, so respondents will find it boring. So we have to somehow be innovative. We have to innovate and to get their interest wherein forming a booklet type of questionnaire is quite interesting. Next is color coding. The color coding might help you keep track of all different variations. You'll be less likely to enter the wrong number into your response data file if you color code it. Color coding is way too helpful in many ways. For researchers, this serves as a marker on multiple versions of questionnaires. By this, questionnaires can be separated easily as they are different based on the type of questions and based on the colors. Question numbering. Numbering items on paper and pencil questionnaires can help with data entry by giving checkpoints. Numbering questions makes it easier for the respondents to answer, especially when there are skip patterns. Fitting questions on the page. Respondents find crowded questionnaires unsightly and intimidating. People are more inclined to respond thoughtfully to a questionnaire that is visually appealing. A quality design questionnaire is what gives respondents interest in answering. So a questionnaire with a very small font and unreadable may cause negative response since respondents doesn't like those style of questionnaire. Pre-coding. This coding approach is beneficial because it speeds up data entering. Any closed-ended questions can be pre-coded. This is used for closed-ended questions. Pre-coding is very efficient since it develops the data entry. Formatting consistently to guide respondents through your questionnaire. You can use bolded text to indicate questions, italics to indicate response categories, shaded boxes to show expanded instructions, and arrows to indicate skip patterns. However, such standards should be followed consistently. You can modify question elements to enable respondents to see things in the correct sequence even if your word processing skills are limited. The contents of the questionnaire may look bizarre if the fonts and styles are different. Respondents might see it as unattractive and uninteresting. Instead, have consistency in designing a questionnaire for a good outcome. However, overstyling and exaggerating the design of the questionnaire doesn't always work too. Maybe simple yet consistent may do. Next is choosing simple answer formats. It is recommended that you limit the amount of options you give to the respondents to avoid the confusion. Providing a proper answer format prevents respondents' confusion and frustration. Also, it prevents researchers to have a complicated analysis. Avoid in order to mali. To achieve these preventions, there are some ways that we must do and avoid in creating a answer formats. Okay, let's naman to. Best practices. Throughout your questionnaire, it is better to run all of your scales in the same directions, for example, from negative to positive. In putting the answer formats, consistency is important. It must be placed in the same direction, and answer formats should give respondents the best option they can choose with. Next is practices to avoid. Avoid using formats that are overly complicated. This will keep your respondents in a positive frame of mind and encourage them to complete your survey. We must avoid putting instructions that they can choose all that applies, because this causes them not to thoroughly read the questionnaire and just check and answer whatever and wherever they wanted to. Next is reducing complexity by offering fewer response options. Self-administered mail questionnaires perform better than telephone questionnaires for items with multiple response alternatives. Fewer options can make the respondents pick immediately and can easily remember the choices, rather than having a variety of options wherein the respondents might forget the first ones.